Oh, and good evening. It's May 22nd, 2025, and welcome to one of our branches on the vine with another video, the teaching for the folks at Aleph Beta. I enjoy connections across Scripture. The idea of putting ourselves in somebody else's shoes, right? Strapping on the sandals. The idea of trying to understand, to empathize with the characters. I'm reminded that these were real people, actual agendas. Here at the Dusty Feet, we often try on sandals for the good and the not so good. So this episode from Rabbi David Fohrman caught my attention. What does Aaron teach us about loss? Because in this story from Scripture, I heard the pain, the heart of a broken father, Aaron, who not only lost his two oldest sons, but he still had to do the task that God had asked of him. And this is how he chose to express that loss in the task at hand. So here we go with, what does Aaron teach us about loss? With Aleph Beta on the Dusty Feet. Our hope with the Dusty Feet is to foster discussion and help build and support communities. If you are not already connected to a community or just want to share and interact, this community has 4 primary ways to interact. 1. DustyFeet.com. That's our primary place to find everything. You are always free to comment. 2. Facebook, at the Dusty Feet. These videos and other videos are also available for comment and discussion. And 3. We have a Discord channel. The invite link is there below. Be vocal, be written, be loving. And 4, and as always, you are welcome to send an email to bob@thedustyfeet.com. These places, they will be moderated, and guidelines will be set to ensure healthy, safe discussion. And as always on the Dusty Feet, this is a place where we can safely explore the endless ways of God and the interconnection of His creation. Belief understandings may be challenged, divine misunderstandings may exist, and traditional teachings might falter as we pursue connection, context, and community with God and each other here in an environment of grace and love. Oh, and before we forget, if you find these kinds of podcasts useful, that's when you click that subscribe button. The reminders, they just help you. But also, you think these might be useful to others, that is when you click that like button, because that is how YouTube chooses to share these to more people if they wish. We try on sandals here. We try to see the lives of these characters, these real people in Scripture, and in doing that, we can, maybe, grow an understanding through what they are going through. Loss. We will all be touched, engrossed, or engulfed by it. One could say loss is a part of life. I'm not sure it's that simple, but we become attached, entangled, we become intertwined with the lives of others all around us for many reasons. Birth, marriage, friendship, even a kinship in adversity. People are part of us, and then they're lost. Death comes for us all at one time or another. It's one of God's other promises that we sometimes struggle with. So we entered this discussion on the after they died, right? As in we, in this story, with Aaron. Remember, we are them and they are us, right? But he suffered a tragic loss on a very public scale. I mean, all of Israel knows. In our world today, it's frontline news on all the stations. Of course, plastered across social media. But we're not going to be discussing the details of that loss. That's for another discussion at another time. Our choice here is to discuss the aftermath. Because still, Aaron is the appointed high priest of God. He still has tasks that need to happen. Remember, he is the intercessory priest between God and the people. And in those tasks, and in that moment, Aaron makes choices. Heart choices. Broken heart choices. So let's watch Rabbi Fohrman's video. What does Aaron teach us about loss? We'll discuss it on the other side. Enjoy.
Hi everybody, this is Rabbi David Fohrman and welcome to Parshat Shmini. You are watching Aleph Beta. This video is dedicated in blessed memory of Glynis Sher, Gittel Bas Eliyahu, by her loving son Dani, her daughter-in-law Jenny, and her grandchildren Joshua, Cassie, and Leo. Thank you so much for your generosity. If you would like to dedicate a video, please feel free to contact us and we'll be happy to arrange for it. This week's Parsha contains the famous story of the deaths of the two sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, during the consecration of the tabernacle procedure when they bring incense in a way that wasn't commanded. A fire comes out from the Kodesh Kodashim, from the Holy of Holies, consuming them, and they die. The tragic moment. Much ink has been spilled in trying to understand it. We took a stab at this in last year's video on Parshat Shmini. I encourage you to take a look. But right now I'd like to focus with you on a very obscure story that takes place right afterwards. The story doesn't get a lot of press because it is so obscure, but here's what happens. Right after the deaths of Nadav and Avihu, evidently there was a chatat, a sin offering, that was to be brought in the tabernacle. And a dispute erupts between, of all people, Moses and the two surviving sons of Aaron, and the dispute concerns how it was that the chatat was offered. Moses says that it wasn't offered properly, and Aaron comes to their defense and says that it really was, and they talk about just these really arcane laws, and you're thinking, like, why is it that they're even discussing this? I mean, there was this terrible tragedy, their brothers just died, and now we're getting into whether they messed up and exactly how it is that they offered the chatat, whether they ate the meat, they didn't eat the meat. Who even cares about this? And also, the placement of the story seems so strange. The brothers of these people have died. Now you're arguing with them over whether a chatat was eaten properly? Why are we debating sacrificial law now? But I think if you look carefully at the story, that's actually what the story is about. It's about what it means to struggle with the death of your brothers. Let me explain what I mean here, and in order to do that, I really need to take you back to a paradigm that I introduced to you back in Parshat Vayikra as to how to understand three basic types of offerings: an olah, a shlamim, and a chatat. The chatat is a sin offering, what we're talking about over here in our little story involving Aaron and his children and Moses. In order to really understand what was happening with that chatat and what the significance of eating that chatat is, I want to contrast it for you with an olah offering. And this was really the argument that I made to you back in Parshat Vayikra. That when you look at an olah, an offering that goes entirely up to God, and you look at a chatat, an offering that part of its meat is consumed by the Kohanim, these two offerings, the olah and the chatat, are actually sort of inverses of each other. Let's talk about the tension between an olah and a chatat. So the argument I made to you back in Vayikra is that in order to understand a chatat, you sort of have to go back to the first great sin of humanity, the eating of forbidden fruit. God had given a world of paradise to humanity, all these trees, but instead, we didn't go for any of the trees that we were permitted to eat from. The only thing that made a difference for us was the one tree we couldn't have. You see, the tree of knowledge of good and evil was the master's tree, and the desire to eat from it at some level, with the desire to play God, to pretend that I could have the master's one tree, that I could play master of the garden. That was the first transgression, the first thing that was off limits to mankind. Later on, when the Torah is given, the Torah introduces other things that are off limits. But by extension, in every one of these negative commandments, there's a little bit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. There's a sense that by honoring those commands, we are honoring God's sovereignty. We are acknowledging that this world that we have is a gift from God, and therefore we honor the restrictions that He places upon us. It's the least we can do to show that we understand that we're guests in this great garden that God has given us, in this world that God has given us. So what happens then when you inadvertently transgress one of these negative commands? When you've done this, you've engaged in a kind of sin. An imbalance has been introduced into your relationship with God. And with a sin offering, you try symbolically at least to correct that imbalance, to rebalance the scale, with a curious kind of reciprocity. Going back to that paradigmatic Garden of Eden sin, you ate from something that was out of bounds, that was in God's world. So you give something back to God to be eaten. Now, obviously, God doesn't have a mouth to eat something, but that's what the Kohanim are there for. God gives the Kohanim this meat from the Chatat offering and says, you have this on behalf of me, and will bring balance back to this relationship again. So if that's what a Chatat is, what is an Olah? The inverse of a Chatat. If the impetus for a Chatat is that I crossed over illegitimately, so to speak, into God's domain, and there was one special thing for God, and I took that one special thing, then the impetus for an Olah is that in my domain, there's one special thing, the thing that's most mine, and I just feel like I have to abandon that. I have to abandon everything and just give it to God just voluntarily, because there really is no domain that's mine. Everything is God's. Back in Parshat Vayikra, we talked about the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, as the great paradigm for Olahs. What's the one special thing you have? It's your child. I mean, Abraham was ready to give back his child. God didn't take it, but that was the sense of abandonment. Ata yadati kirei Elokim ata, the angel says. Now I know that you're someone who's in awe of God. That's what awe is. It's just a feeling of complete abandonment. Nothing is mine, even the thing that appears to be most mine. I give everything to you. So now let's come back to our story. Does this remind you of anything? They had given everything, that which was most theirs, their own kin. They had watched God take that. Vayidom Aaron, and Aaron had been silent. How could he accept it? It's an outrage. How could you do this? How could you take them? They were just trying to come close to you. But in his silence, Aaron had touched that energy of awe, that energy of abandonment. Abraham, in one of the very first Olahs that the Torah ever records, had been asked to give the thing that was most his child, back to God, but at the last moment God had said no. But here, at the last moment, God didn't say no. God took that one thing from Aaron, his children, and Aaron had been silent, had accepted it. It was the abandonment energy of the Olah. And now let's go to the text and read this little dispute here. Just after the deaths of Nadav and Avihu, a chatat is offered in the Mishkan on behalf of the entire community. But it wasn't offered properly. Ve'etzir chatat darosh garash Moshe. Moshe inquired after this chatat and found hine saraf. It was entirely burned, as if it were an olah. Vayiksof al Elazar v'al Itamar b'nei Aaron. And he became angry at Elazar and Itamar, the surviving sons of Aaron. He said to them, Madua lo achaltem et hachatat? Why didn't you eat the chatat? Ki kodesh kodashim hi, it's the holiest of the holies. V'otana tan lachem laset et avon ha'edah. The meat of the chatat is given to you in order to attain atonement for the people. Moses is making the point about how a chatat works. People are giving something to God, so to speak, to eat. It becomes Kodesh Kodashim. It becomes taken in by God's domain. It's the holiest of the holies. And then the Kohanim, they eat the meat to complete the circle, to effect atonement. What's the role of the Kohanim here? They're being called upon to take something, and in so doing, they restore the boundaries of the divine estate. Those boundaries had been violated in a sin. With the eating of a chatat, the circle is closed and the boundary is restored. The ones who illegitimately ate from something that should have been God's have now given something back for God, so to speak, to eat, and the Kohanim do their part to restore that boundary. But what had these Kohanim, Elazar and Itamar, they lived through the completely opposite energy of a chatat, the energy of an olah. And they ended up treating this offering, this chatat, not as a chatat, but allowing it to be entirely consumed as if it were an olah. They didn't eat the meat. They felt they couldn't take it on behalf of God somehow. Yes, they were Kohanim, but they were also human beings. And as a human, as a private individual citizen, what had they just lived through? Utter loss, utter abandonment, no boundaries whatsoever. If you're Aaron, grappling with the unspeakable loss, you say to yourself, boundaries? The very word is an outrage. There are no boundaries. I am nothing. I can take nothing. Everything has been taken from me. All I can do is to stand still and allow that to happen. That's the energy of an olah. That's what they had gone through. And that's Aaron's response to Moses. Today the chatat was brought, he said. Vatikra eno tikaela. But look what has befallen me, the loss of my children. V'achalti chatat hayom. And on that day, would I eat a chatat on behalf of God? Hayitav b'nei Hashem, do you think God would find that pleasing? How could I take even on behalf of God? How could I assert boundaries even on behalf of God when I have nothing left to give, when everything's been taken from me, and when I feel that there's just no boundaries left, there's no boundary that I can assert? A Kohen is a representative of the divine estate on the one hand, but he is also a human on the other hand, and sometimes those spiritual energies collide. This was one instance in which they did. Vayishma Moshe, and Moshe heard. Vayitav beinav, and it was okay in his eyes. You know, when you're a high priest, that almost always eclipses your role as a private individual, but not always. And for one brief moment, Aaron the human, in his own struggle with God, had to eclipse Aaron the high priest. And it was okay.
Offerings, right? Expressions to God, giving to God, the expectations from God. I suspect many are probably unfamiliar with the offerings, which probably causes some problems because we haven't taken the time to look and see what those offerings or those sacrifices actually were, right? And then sometimes we don't, we lose the opportunity to gain the wisdom of what's behind these offerings, who they were meant for, which were to be consumed, which were not to be consumed. Who benefited from that? One of the things that I really enjoyed about how the rabbi presented the offerings was that he attached a feeling. Yeah, I kind of think I mean feeling, because it's also a thought, but I think it's a thought with a feeling behind it. Does that make sense? I'm unsure, but he brought up respect, love, awe. We're going to explore those more as we discuss this, but there's usually when there's that type of thought, because I mentioned feeling, there's going to be a heart element in it. It's because in those, that's where it's felt. So God takes us, the rabbi takes us back to the garden, right? To this part where we're trying to eat what God has said us not to. That's not for you. Because this theme is repeated many times in Scripture. There's this, and that's not for you. Because this is one of those challenges that I have with this walk. We have people who've said that none of that matters anymore because of Jesus. And that's hard for me to grapple with because we have so many things. There's probably too many to get into right now. That'll be a bit overwhelming. But I think this is part of the continuing biblical story. Meaning God says things that are not yours because it's a continuing test for us. Are we willing to listen? Are we willing to say, hey, that might be for other people, it's just not for us. It's because of our purpose. I think God reminds us that they will do what they will do. They're not mine, as in not my representatives. Yes, all are God's children, as in breath is only granted from God. So I could say they're all, and they all have choices, just like us, or for them with Israel. But they choose to follow God. So some things are for us, others are not. We make the same choice as in the garden. We follow God, we eat this. We follow God, we don't eat this. Story just continues. One way the rabbi expressed this thought, I really like this, is when he said, you've created an imbalance and something has to happen to rebalance it. I think, interestingly, we talk at times, we've been told that these instructions, they don't apply, that they were and that they were meant to be kept perfectly. I think that whole discussion of perfect is again for another time, but inside of this is in these instructions, when you do this, this is how to bring it back, how to bring the balance back, as the rabbi put it. But that's built into it. So when you don't follow it, the balance is broken when it gets transgressed. But then what do? How do does that mean that we should perfectly follow it by breaking it so we can rebalance it? Yeah, that sounds silly when you say it. But again, it raises more questions. It's for another time. So this part about eating the sacrifice given to the priests is about giving back to God, right? As we've mentioned, God doesn't have hands, doesn't have feet, doesn't have mouth, a digestive system, the need for sustenance. But even in this balancing system that God is creating for the land to flourish, to prosper, for the land to be an example to those all around, in that giving to God, you sustain his people, his priests. It's why I wanted to bring this up for some interesting discussion. So please discuss that amongst yourselves, because I think there's some great questions under this that are well worth your time. But in this instance, we're talking about the fact that food is meant to be consumed. It's meant to be respected. It's meant to be consumed. It's there for a purpose. But then there's that hatat, that offering that's given to God in the realization that it's all God's, right? The other one was for transgression, when we've transgressed that imbalance between God. And I think as we go through this road that we're on, eventually down there, I'm looking forward to it. We're going to look at all these instructions, and we're going to see also about that imbalance to man, how that works out. But there's the Olah Hatat. This Olah offering is given out of the abundance that you have, right? The heart that's coming from it. And that's all consumed. It's burned up, all of it. It's given to God because the acknowledgement is in that the mindset, it's all his anyways. It's always been this. We expect that we're showing awe. We're showing reverence to the one who provides it all. But here we have another interaction, a different interaction. In this instance, God himself takes something. And in this, then we are the ones with the imbalance. We could almost say a gross imbalance. Because when the rabbi says that consuming the sacrifice restores the balance, I think he's making the point that the priests are the visual representation of that restoring balance, that God has accepted, that he's taking it in. You know, it's interesting. Would you ever think that part of being a priest is eating food, right? Eating food is part of what God's visual representation of that he wants to see that in restoring balance? I think we can gain some wisdom from that when we respect God in his consumption choices. So if we're his representatives and we want to play these roles, we often do it in our churchanity way, right? We want to be the priests. We talk about this. This is one of those phrases that gets bantered about. These priests are representatives of God. They're doing God's tasks. And in this one, they're just representing God at this point in the task. Just consumption. Just that God says, that's not food for you. That food's for me. Or that food's for you. It's my people. They can eat it. But they're not for you, those other foods. They're because you're representing me, right? This This is food for you. So I guess you could call that food for discussion. Yeah, I had to go there. Sorry, food for thought. Yet this sacrifice shows that there's a lot going on. There's a lot happening with the remaining brothers. Because remember, it's not just Aaron who's lost his sons, it's the brothers. I've lost my brothers. There's a mom who's lost her children. There's a lot going on. And as the rabbi put it, he called it utter loss, abandonment, no boundaries whatsoever. They had experienced something, and in their broken response, their heartbroken response, they just chose to give it all to God by burning it all of their part. Because I'm thinking about an upside down thought, and this hit me while I was listening to it. It's almost like I want to be careful about how I say this. I want to be respectful of the instructions. As I thought about this and I was listening, it almost, I don't know if the rabbi inferred it, I want to be careful. But I think, in a sense, this is almost like for Aaron and the brothers, they're his sons. They're talking about a double offering. And in the all-consuming fire, they say, yeah, that is ours to eat. But we need to do this. Yeah, I think I'll repeat that. Yeah, we need to do this. We must give this all to God. Because our hearts are too broken to consume it. Because in the interchange, right, Aaron was silent for a bit, but then when he chooses to speak, his heart almost explodes, right? He pushes back, he goes to Moses. His heart is raw. In the pain of the moment, that expression is, how can I eat that? Because those sons, the ones that are dead, they were supposed to be part of this. So yeah, in that discussion that you're having with yourselves about the event that brought us here, because those sons, they were behaving less than godly. There were consequences. But they were Aaron's sons. And as he lays out his heart, he knows he's chosen to give it to God. Everything in this, that was supposed to be for him and for his family. All that food, in that brokenness, to acknowledge that they were all yours anyways. It still hurts. And Aaron kind of like, and this is the way I need to express this. Priest, again, please talk amongst yourselves when you think about this role, how it existed back then, how you might think it exists today. And in that discussion, the questions may be about what we believe that role expresses to God and the others. Because it's not a name tag. It's not a line on a business card. It comes with responsibility. I think the point is that their priests are representatives of God, but they're also human. Yes, broken humans, just like we are. Yeah, God gives some people specific tasks. I think any task that God's give is essential. So I'm not going to say that some are more important than others. Some might be more visual than others in this priestly role, because Aaron is a very visual role, probably the most visual role. But he's also a father who's lost his two oldest sons, and he needs to grapple with that between God, between himself, his family, and Moses. Moses, he listens to Aaron. We read the words. Sometimes you can even speak the words with emotion. But Moses gets a chance to look Aaron in the eyes, probably with tears flowing down. So Moses gets it. He understands. He feels the pain. Like I said, we all experience loss. I mean, in the beginning, it's kind of given, but those that are very young may not have experienced much loss, but some, though, even young, they have too. But as you grow older, you will for sure experience it. It's how you handle the loss, how you grapple with the loss, with the people, with God, because these things cause us challenges. This is one of those places where there are probably more questions than answers because we feel the imbalance, the boundary violation. How do we help restore that balance? More questions than answers. Yet we see here where it's an earthly discussion about a heavenly frustration. Does that make sense? I mean, Aaron discusses an earthly frustration about a heavenly frustration when he lays his point out to Moses. Because life is going to continue for Aaron and for his family, right? One of his sons, he's going to be involved in the story later on. It continues, right? Eleazar watched. He had his father's example. Remember, like his father, that it's all God's anyways. How do we deal with that? I think that's a discussion, right? I think there are earthly discussions for heavenly challenges. So find those to discuss with. Seek those who can look you in the eye. I want to see you. I want to hear you. But I want you to always remember that God is in the picture. So thanks again for being with us tonight for another Branches on the Vine with Rabbi David Fohrman on the Dusty Feet.